Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and I am here for my LPL week number 5 overview and analysis video in the spring split. This one's coming out a day late. Again, I do apologize. I've said it a couple of times here, but I'm in the middle of a move. I don't know if everything sounds a little bit different here. My room is almost completely emptied out from what it was before, so even less to bounce sound off of, even more of an echo. Hopefully that will get better as we get into a new place, but at least for today, I hope you can stick with me as we go through everything that happened in week 5 of the LPL spring split. I don't know why I blanked on that. I have no clue. We are really working here. We've watched a lot of games in a very short amount of time. I hope you guys are excited. I know I'm excited to talk about it, as has become pretty normal at the start of these videos, though. Let's go ahead and kind of talk about some of the casts that I'm going to be on for the LPL in the upcoming week. I'm actually going to be casting tonight as you guys are watching this video, or as this is getting uploaded, May 7th, technically the morning here of May 7th. I will only be on the Ninjas in Pyjamas Weibo gaming cast, and so if you're excited for that series, go ahead and check that out. Again, link will be in the description, but I'm also on May 11th and May 12th. I'll be on for Ultra Prime taking on LGD, as well as both of the series on May 12th, so Thunder Talk, Anyone's Legend, as well as Ninjas in Pyjamas and FunPlus Phoenix. If you're excited about that, or if you want to, get my thoughts live about how the LPL is going and you want to see those casts, check them out. Links for both the YouTube and the Twitch will be in the description as per usual, but today we are going to be getting into week number 5, kind of talking about every single series and going over everything. We're going to be going series by series, talking about the advantages and disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the series and a dud of the series for each series that we cover, and at the end of the week, I will be giving a player of the week and a dud of the week to tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. We will be updating my personal power rankings from number 1 to number 16, talking about where everybody lands, and especially for Group Nirvana, this is a big week. We've kind of been leading into a lot of the conversations around 2 teams getting eliminated, but by the end of this week, we're going to know at the very least 1 team that will not be playing in the summer split, whose year will be done after spring. So a lot on the line even for them, which has not necessarily been the case the entirety of the split up until this point. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the content itself, and that starts with day number 1, and we're actually starting with Group Nirvana for a change. We don't typically start out down in Group Nirvana, but it's a matchup between LNG Esports and RNG, Royal Never Give Up, and LNG keeps their hot streak going by picking up a 2-0 win here, and it's a pretty good 2-0 overall. Just a really strong-looking team at the current moment. Xiaofang coming in and really kind of, I don't want to say reinvigorating everybody on the team, because I think that there were some inherent problems that they have started to grow out of, and, a player like Zika on the top side was already playing really well for LNG, but you look at players like Haichao, you look at players like Zhuo, and they're playing infinitely better now that Xiaofang has come in and really just changed how they play out their early games, and LNG has really started to get hot because of it. I'm certainly not trying to say that this is some sort of top 8 team like we thought they would be going into the year, but at the very least, this is a competitive team at the moment, which is not what they were for most of the beginning part of this year. And for RNG on the other side, this team is bad. They're going to be fighting it out to just survive moving on, and really they put themselves in one of the worst positions possible to be going into that spot. This is a very realistic outcome, to sit here for RNG and be like, yeah, you're bottom 2, you're not going to be in summer, you can already barely afford to pay your players, and we might never see this organization ever again, which is an absolute disaster for them. But again, we'll get into that when we talk about RNG. When we start with LNG, it's got to go to Xiaofang, player of the series here. This was a gigantic jungle gap. There was really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Milky Way could not keep up under any circumstance with what Xiaofang was doing. It would be disingenuous, I think, to say that he was the only player on the team playing well or anything like that, but I do think he was the driving force and the one kind of pushing them forward. But the player that I honestly think has benefited the most from some of the roster changes, and I said this last week, I'm going to reiterate the point this week, is Zhuo down in the support position. He was awesome, way better than Niket on the other side of this, and Niket's been very good for RNG, certainly a nice playmaker, and we saw a couple of nice plays from him throughout this series, but Zhuo was definitely the better support here, and he's been really good ever since Xiaofang joined, and more specifically, I think ever since Fodak got benched. I really do have like a strong take, and I think maybe a bit of a shocking take, and that's that I think Zhuo is actually a pretty good support in the LPL. I just think he's been held back by the fact that Fodak is unplayable as an AD carry, truly one of the worst in the entire league. I think now that we've seen him go from Fodak to LP, by the way, not a star, certainly not a player that I have a ton of confidence or faith in individually himself, himself, but just a player who's not going to get hit in his own way. Like, he just doesn't have crazy mechanics. He's going to play for the team. It allows Zhuo to be more of a playmaker and more aggressive for this team, and I think overall it's really worked for him, and he's been awesome over the past couple of series. The aggressiveness is definitely dialed up to a pretty extreme level. That Poppy game in particular in game number 2 was really nice. So Zhuo playing well, Xiaofeng playing really well. Zika continues to be one of the best top laners in the league. He's just stuck on a really bad team. If he was on a good team, everybody would be able to tell. And then Haichao has definitely gotten back into form with the jungler that actually wants to play for him in the mid lane. Haichao, you know, getting better, I think, at these like shove and roam mid laners. Certainly not the main character of this team. He's not picking things like Akali like Tong Yuan did on the other side, but at the end of the day, LNG just feels so much better, and I think a lot of that is because their plan is so much clearer. They're not just instantly losing in the jungle every matchup, which is very helpful. And then for RNG on the other side, you know, some pluses and some minuses. I don't think everything here was bad. I think Jiachi continues to be fine on the bot side of the map. Certainly not the worst AD carry in the world. LP was really good, or at least played well within the structure of LNG for LNG themselves, but Jiachi was the one trying to be aggressive. Tong Yuan has some moments, right? Like, he's always going to be a player that has ups and downs, that has inconsistencies, but at the end of the day, I just think there's an inherent skill gap. Like, he's just not consistent enough to be considered a player that can routinely make a lot of great plays. I think this is the thing I say a lot about, like, you know, replicable accuracy in terms of player evaluations. It's very true that players at this level are oftentimes going to have 1 or 2 games where they completely pop off. I'm not judging how good you are mechanically by your best games. I'm judging what your average game looks like. And unfortunately for Tong Yuan, his average game is just lower than a lot of other mid laners. I'm certainly not trying to say that there aren't moments that you could cherry pick out of a lot of these games where he plays better than even some of the better mid laners in the entire region. He just doesn't do it consistently. He's never been able to do it consistently, and that is a big problem. That is a reason that he's never really been able to find any success at this level, especially outside of that rookie split where he inexplicably won rookie of the split. I still can't believe that he won that. Xiaoshu has completely regressed. He has become one of the worst top laners in the league. It's very frustrating to watch. A player who once had a ton of promise has completely faded away, but like I said, Milky Way is going to get dead of the series, and I think a lot of it is just watching the tempo fade entirely out of his hands. He's a very one-dimensional player, and when he gets thrown off, when he loses that tempo in the early game, it's actually just individually doomed for him as a player. He's gotten exposed on what his playstyle is, and he's not been able to adapt, and it's going to lead to him being one of the first junglers actually eliminated from the LPL, which is just really frustrating. Now, obviously, that nothing is set in stone yet for RNG. They're going to have a chance to stay alive later on in the week, but at least for now, like, they're not on a good trajectory to give you any confidence to believe that they're going to be able to survive that kind of movement, especially when the player that they brought in to really be the primary carry, the primary option for this team, is getting out jungled by Xiaofeng, who hasn't played all year long, who's coming in as a replacement, but he really has ignited a fire under LNG and made them look a lot better. I think especially jungle and support are really kind of clicking right now for this team, and if that's going to be the case, I don't know, man. Top 2 is technically still reachable for a team like LNG if they were to go undefeated. It's still a far cry, but this at the very least looks like a team that's going to be able to survive, which was not the case a couple weeks ago. Then moving on now to our second series of day number 1, and we're moving up to Group Ascend here as we see FunPlus Phoenix taking on Bilibili Gaming, and FPX is going to pick up a pretty shocking 2-1 win. I don't think this is the most surprising thing in the world, especially if you've been following the channel. I think I talk about these teams very similarly in terms of how they've ended up playing. BLG has fallen all the way to number 6 in my power rankings because I really don't believe in this iteration of 5. We'll talk about the, you know, adjustments that this team makes later on in the week because they do make some pretty big ones. BLG have a pretty mega week coming up here. They play 4 best of 3s across this entire week, and so I'm not going to dive too deep into them right now as we're going to see a lot more of them later. But for FPX, this is absolutely a team that can take advantage of any other team in Group Ascend that's making mistakes. They're not the most dynamically, you know, talented team in the entire universe. They have players that I'm really not a gigantic fan of. You know, Awesome comes to mind there down in the bot lane. He's just a player that I've really never been all that sold on. I don't really think is all that good. I think is a bit overhyped. But, you know, I think that there are a lot of other, you know, success stories on this team that are really performing well. Sheer has been a player I've gone to bat for a lot this year, even if he wasn't quite as, you know, integral towards their success in this series. And really, the star of this team right now is Jue in the support position, who is going to get player of the series. He beat up on Bilibili Gaming in this series. There's really not a lot of other ways to look at it. He was the best player on the Rift. In Game 1, he was excellent on the Rel. In Game 3, he was excellent on the Braum. He just was fantastic for FPX, and that's a really good sign. Again, I'm not the biggest Awesome fan down in the bot lane. I do think that he has some pluses and some minuses, some, good moments and some bad moments, but I don't think he's ever going to be a top tier AD carry at this level, and I think that that's been proven because the rest of this team is clicking. But Jway can really create for everybody on the map. He makes Awesome's job really easy, but more specifically, he makes Shadow's job really easy, and that in turn makes FPX's job really easy as a team when you can play around jungle in that way. He's just a phenomenal facilitator. He's really good at being able to get out on the map and create a lot of plays. I'm really happy to kind of have been early on the bandwagon for Jway when he was coming out of the LDL. I was a big fan of his and the gameplay that he had. I'm really glad to see that that has translated now that he's on a better team than what he was on last year. So good stuff from Jway. He continues to be awesome. Shadow was really good in this series, was definitely the better jungler here. Pretty big jungle gap, especially on the Lee Sin in game number 3, where things just went atrociously wrong for Wei on the Nocturne. But Shadow has been pretty good over the course of Group Ascend. I'm not going to try and sit here and tell you that he's been the best player of all time. I think his job is a little bit easier right now than other junglers because he doesn't have to create as much, with Jway being the primary playmaker and Care being a lot more active on the map than maybe he's been in the past couple of years. But Shadow still is stepping up, and I've always been a pretty big fan of Shadow on this channel from his time on LGD and his time on Ninjass and Pyjamas. And so, again, glad to see him succeeding at this level. We kind of expected this, kind of gameplay from him when he joined FPX. Sheer was better than Bin. I don't care what the score lines end up saying. Sheer was the better player in this series. Care continues to really step up as long as the rest of the team around him is stepping up. He's been really up and down over the course of his LPL tenure, but, overall right now it's fine. FPX just are a team that's good enough to be able to capitalize when the other team makes a mistake, and BLG is just super off their game right now. Credit to Knight and Elk. I think that they were fine. They were certainly not the problem here, but all 3 of the other 3 members had some bad moments. I'm going to give On a little bit of a pass because that Nico game in game 2 was really phenomenal from him, and he was able to create a lot, and honestly, not every single engage on the Alistar in game 3 was bad, but he certainly was outplayed by Jway in this series. He was not the better support. I just have more concerns about the top side of the map right now. Wei is going to get dead of the series. If you've been following this channel, you'll know that I sold my Wei stocks a long time ago. In fact, I sold my Wei stocks before he ever joined BLG. It was a take that I looked kind of bad for a lot of last year because I was really critical of BLG bringing him on in the first place. It didn't really feel like it made a lot of sense in terms of a playstyle fit, and, at least at the start, it kind of worked. BLG got a little bit slower, but certainly a little bit more methodical, a little bit more calculated. Their games weren't quite as kill-heavy, but they were definitely more dominant victories, and that looked like a big plus in favor of Wei. But the problem is that going into 2025, other teams have gotten more chaotic, and BLG now can no longer match because Wei can't really play that style. We're seeing it with Jway and Shadow. If the enemy team is going to force tempo and kind of increase the rate at which a lot of this game happens, Wei is not really able to match that. He's just a player that I don't really believe in at the top level anymore. I've been saying that for years on RNG. I think that that was a thing that Wei was showing even when he was on a bad version of RNG. And I get that there's some tape that you throw out as a jungler if your team is bad, but I think it was pretty obvious that Wei was in over his head as a pick for BLG, and I lambasted this decision in the offseason, and unfortunately, it's kind of been the case. He's been okay at beating up on players that he's better than, but even here, this is the series that you need to be winning if you're Wei to keep your job. He's not winning it. It's not good enough. Bin has also just not been good enough on the top side. He's not even been a top 5 top laner in the LPL this year, and I do want to say, I understand that this guy kind of has a reputation of not being great in the regular season. It's something I talk about a lot here when you look back at 2020 and 2021, these eras where you consider, Gigabin to be in his prime when he was making World Finals on Suning. He was having bad regular seasons then too, just because he wasn't necessarily entirely locked in, but right now it feels a little bit different. He's not very good at Mbessa, and you have to imagine that that's going to get better, but it's kind of a big handicap in the current meta. So Bin and Wei not really playing up to standard, and FPX certainly good enough to capitalize on that. This isn't the most shocking win in the entire world for me, even if it kind of looks like it on paper. Then moving on now to day number 2, and we're going back down to Group Nirvana, getting a lot of these at the start of the week. It's Edward Gaming taking on LGD Gaming, and Edward Gaming is going to pick up the 2-1 series win. I shouldn't say this like it's a big surprise. This isn't really an upset if you look at these two teams on paper, but LGD has really been rolling over the past couple of weeks. They've looked like the pretty clear-cut best team in Group Nirvana, at least from my perspective on tape, and, their performances, I think, have backed that up, especially with Nayu coming in and playing in the jungle, but EDG has a a pretty good jungler of their own, and it's finally time for him to start rolling. Xiao Hao is going to get yet another player of the series for me. I'm never going to jump off the Xiao Hao bandwagon. He's legitimately one of my favorite players in the world to watch. I think he's just good at everything, and, you know, I feel really frustrated that his only real shot at being on a top team in the LPL was on that Weibo gaming team where he ends up getting replaced by Tarzan, who I consider the best jungler in the world. Just feels actually absurd, but Xiao Hao continues to be awesome for this team, and even Neyu, who's been really, like I said, rolling on the other side of this for LGD, he was not good enough to be able to go up against Xiao Hao, who just is great at controlling pressure. When you look at game one, on the Xinjiao, you see this really great game of tempo where he's just able to fight over every objective. I've been pretty critical of the Xinjiao Talia mid-jungle duo because I just worry that you kind of, you know, draft yourself into a corner, especially against Azir, Caitlyn, and Rumble, and like all these picks that are going to be really difficult to punish in that way, but Xiao Hao played that game expertly. And then the Neferi in game number 3. If you give a player this good, a champion who's that strong, it's going to be a pretty predictable outcome, and that's exactly what happened here for Xiao Hao. So credit to EDG playing around their jungler. You know, other credit to give on this team, I think Wink is starting to get back into form on. I think it's starting to feel a lot more comfortable here for EDG. Both of those things are really big positives for this team. I was very disappointed with how On was playing at the beginning of this split, but I think it just took him some time to get used to playing again at this level. Again, he didn't play at all in Winter in Split 1, and so to see him come back here for Spring, probably getting the job he should have had the entire time, and, you know, kind of succeeding on it, at least now. He's starting to play some better games. It's a good sign. I think Wink, especially as a facilitator, is really starting to get into form, and that's with the LGD bot lane kind of stepping up and playing fine across this series, which we will talk about. Angel was okay. ZDZ did his thing. I'm still super anti-ZDZ as a player, and, you know, he should still be giving Xiao Hao every single dollar of his paycheck every single year to keep him on these teams, but at the end of the day, Xiao Hao is really good and is probably the best player in Group Nirvana, at least from my perspective. Him and Zika are kind of dueling it out for best player in Group Nirvana, but Xiao Hao's certainly been more productive, in my opinion, in 2025, and so EDG continue to climb to the top. This team wants to, at the very least, get a best of 5 to try to get into playoffs. And then for LGD, this team was, again, rolling. I know I've said it 3 times, but really, they were on fire coming into this series. It really didn't feel like they were going to get stopped at the Group Nirvana level. It probably was going to take them going into a Group Ascend series and getting blasted by one of those teams in order to really feel where LGD's power actually was. But Neyu finally getting caught out for some of those mistakes he's been making in the early game that haven't necessarily been punished. He's going to get dud of the series. It was very clear there was a pretty big jungle gap between these two here, and at the end of the day, that's okay. Like, Neyu's a good player, and I still expect him to be fine, but Xiao Hao is just a little bit better. If LGD aren't able to play around jungle, they go back to being a team that is very bad, like they were in the Winter split, because they don't really have a lot of pressure elsewhere. That being said, I do like how the bot lane played in this series, especially YCX down in the support position. That Leona game in game 2 was phenomenal. I mean, he was everywhere on the map, creating a ton for LGD. I thought Xiaoya did a good job to be able to follow up on it on the Jhin. Just didn't really carry over into the rest of the series. Zhao Qinghua in the mid lane got mega outplayed and continues to be a player that I'm very out on as a mid laner. I just have not been impressed at all with his individual gameplay. Sassy is so feast or famine, it's actually insane. He just cannot have a normal game. He's either going to stomp or he's going to get stomped, and it's frustrating to watch. But, you know, LGD live and die by their players, and, you know, if Zhao Qinghua is going to be a player that you don't believe in, if Neyu's going to lose in the jungle, where there goes your middle of the map, and now all of a sudden EDG has all the pressure and you lose the series. It's pretty predictable on that front. Still think LGD is going to be fine. They're still going to be fighting it out for a top 2 seed, but it certainly makes it, you know, less certain that they're going to be able to get it, and EDG really reinserts themselves as probably the best team in Group Nirvana, or at least certainly a team that has to consider themselves the best team in Group Nirvana. I think their loss to Ultra Prime last week really concerned me. Really kind of made it so I wasn't sure where they were going to land, but this is a good reintroduction to where they're at, and I'm hopeful they're going to keep it up. Then moving on to our second series of day number 2, and man, the bad news keeps on rolling in for BLG. It's Weibo Gaming taking on Bilibili Gaming, and Weibo is going to take the series 2-1 now. BLG lose another one, and even more importantly, Weibo Gaming stay white hot like they are at the current moment. Their change in the support position seems to have invigorated this team. Honestly, roster changes overall a positive right now in the LPL. If you've got the ability to bring in a new player, it kind of seems to be working for everybody that ends up going down that route. We'll see and talk about Bilibili Gaming later on in the week, because this might be the last series that Wei ends up playing for them in the jungle, and of course we will talk about that. But for Weibo Gaming, everything is working once again. This team is very streaky. They're very, hot and cold. That's just naturally what they're going to be. It's what they've always been as an organization, but they're on a hot streak right now. It certainly is looking good at the current moment, and we'll talk about it here. Tian is going to get player of the series. He dominated this one. I'm surprised that player of the game in game 3 did not go to Tian. I understand that Xiaohu was pretty good in that one on Orianna, but that Lilia pick was so gigantic in game 3. They had no real answer to what the Lilia was going to be doing throughout that game, that Tian was basically able to control tempo and how the game ended up going the entire time. And like I said, BLG had no answer. So to me, Tian is the very easy choice for player of the series. He's not been excellent this year. I was definitely expecting a little bit more. He was one of the big 3 junglers heading into the split here in the LPL. Tian, Kanavi, and Tarzan, to me, were kind of the big 3. I think it was pretty clear that they were the 3 best junglers in the LPL. Jun kind of just sitting on the outside looking in, just like, hello, I'm knocking. I'm ready to be there. A lot of people had Wei there. I did not. But Tian, I think, has started to get back into that form that maybe we were anticipating. I think when Weibo is working, they played the Tian style. Super greedy, take everything on the map, don't really give up anything, fight all the time, and that really works out. They didn't have to do that in game number 3, because look at this draft. They were not worried. I mean, even with the Kassadin Jinx on the other side, they were not super worried, because nobody really had the ability to take on the Lilia. But Tian, I think, did a great job, and I think the Skarner game in game number 1 is really what sealed it for me. He was phenomenal in that game. But Xiaohu, I think, definitely deserves a nice shout out here for that Orianna in game number 3. King of Spring is definitely living up to his name at the moment. He has been phenomenal across this split. Light and Era have been great down in the bot lane. I'm not going to tell you that Era's better than Hong was in the support position, because again, I think Hong got scapegoated quite a bit. He was making a lot of bad plays, but so was the rest of this team, and I think the hot and cold streaks don't necessarily correlate to him individually being in. I think it has more to do with the middle of the map just, being good or being bad, but Era, I think, has been pretty solid for this team. They certainly like what they see. He's been in this organization forever. Light has started to feel a lot more comfortable just getting back into that super consistent carry mold. I don't think he has to be a hyper carry for this team in the way that he has been for a couple of teams in the past, but still overall just some pluses for him as a player, and I'm sure he can turn that on whenever he needs to. I think Breathe has been excellent. Like, the numbers are phenomenal. I think that there are some plays that you can look at that make you go, oh, Breathe sucks and the numbers are a lie. I'm not sure I'm on that train. I think that there has been a lot to like about Breede's game. I think that there is not really a lot of consistent top laners at the LPL level, and I would take Breede's current performance over most, maybe everybody outside of 369 at the current moment in the LPL. So everything just kind of working for Weibo. I moved them into the top 4 last week for a reason. They are living up to that right now. And then for Bilibili on the other side, dead of the series kind of has to go to Bin. Like, at some point, we just have to say that this guy has been running it, and he's been bad, like genuinely bad. We make fun of guys like Shanji and Cube all the time here in Group Ascend for not being able to live up to what the expectations of a good top laner, even someone like a Hoya for Thunder Talk, obviously, that, oh, these top laners aren't playing like Group Ascent top laners. Bin right now is playing a lot closer to what Hoya is than what 369 is, and that is just not acceptable. I understand that this guy sometimes underperforms in the regular season. This is taking it to an extreme that he just cannot be at. He has been awful for this team, and he more than deserves dead of the series. Here he's running it down on literally everything, including his signature Renekton, the thing that I think a lot of people associate with him alongside that Gangplank. So not good for Bin. Wei was completely out-jungled here. His game 3 in particular was awful on the Nocturne. A lot to hate about that game. No spoilers, but this is the last series that Wei will be playing for Bilibili Gaming. They go out and get a new jungler that we will talk about, but it's just not looking good for Wei. I think this might be the end of his career. I certainly wouldn't be all that interested in picking him up unless I was a really bad team that just needed anything right now, but then Wei's probably going to cost too much for me to pick up. So I don't know, man. I've always been pretty out on Wei. Unfortunately, I was right about that at the beginning of the year. Elk has really started to struggle in terms of his positions. I don't think Elk has been quite as bad as the numbers would suggest, but he's certainly not been what he was last year, where he was, in my opinion, the best AD carry in the world. On was way too aggressive in this series. Knight didn't get a chance to do anything, but Ego picked Kassadin in game 3. It's just all off right now for BLG, and you have to hope and pray that whatever roster change they're going to make going into game number 3 is going to be enough to keep them stable, because wherever they're at right now, like, this is barely a playoff team, if they are a playoff playoff team. You could be looking at the 7th or 8th best team in the LPL right now with their current form. And for Weibo Gaming on the other side, they're way above that. This is a team that's fighting for top 4, and they could get even better. Like, they're in great form right now. It feels like this meta is really built for them and their aggressiveness to take a lot of fights around every single map objective. We'll see how much that changes getting onto the new map later on in the week, but at least for now, Weibo looking phenomenal, and they're rewarding me for moving them up last week. Then moving on to day number 3 now, and we get kind of a pretty good inclination as to where a couple of teams are going to be heading after this series. It was Thunder Talk Gaming taking on JD Gaming, and the result of this was anticipated. JDG end up absolutely dominating this series, but really, the big takeaway is that Beishwan is out as the jungler of Thunder Talk Gaming. He's been their best player across this split. They're certainly not benching him. There's been a lot of rumors linking him to Bilibili Gaming, and Wei has kind of been not playing well as of late, so, I wonder what's going on there. That being said, they have promoted Zhao Huangren to the starting lineup. This is 2 or 3 years overdue in some people's eyes. I've talked very extensively about my thoughts on Zhao Huangren's LDL tape on this channel. I do not think it's very good. I think this is a very overhyped player, just in terms of where a lot of the narrative has been. I'm glad he's getting a chance to prove himself in the league right now, but he's certainly not entering a good situation in terms of how things are set up, and JDG took full advantage of that. It's going to be a pretty easy conversation to talk about where these teams are at after this series, starting with JDG, player of the series, man. It pays as a monster. I don't know what else you need to see. This guy's the best AD carry in the LPL, and to me, it's not even debatable. He is absolutely dominating this level of competition. We already saw what he could do in the LCK. A lot of people consider the LCK to be stronger than the LPL by a pretty decent margin right now. I'm starting to get into that group. I was not at all in that group last year, but I very much am right now. I think the top 4 teams in the LCK are probably the 4 best teams in the world, and that's crazy to say. I know Top Esports, anyone's legend. I think they could theoretically compete with them, but Pays is a monster. Like, he is a player that should be on a top 1, top 2 team in the world. There's just no excuse for that not to be the case. I think there's some inconsistencies elsewhere on this JDG team. In fact, in his own lane with Missing, who also had some moments in this series that weren't ideal, but Pays cannot be criticized. I mean, he is just on an absolute warpath right now. Best AD carry in the league, and it's not particularly close. There are other players worth shouting out. I think Shun played really well here. Pretty big jungle gap in this series. Zhao Huangren did not look great, but I get it. He's new to the team. He just got called up. He's probably not been practicing with them all that much in terms of the communication style. And also, of course, he's going into Shun, who's one of the best junglers in the world, was just in World Finals, Game 5 of World Finals. And so you're not going to be all that mad about Zhao Huangren looking not very good in this series, but he does need to get better. Shun was very, very solid here. Scout was really nice. Again, I think Scout is a player that gets overhated on because you see some of the flashy negative plays and you don't realize that most of the plays he makes are good, and sometimes he sprinkles in the really bad plays every once in a while. I'm still a fan of Scout as a player. Ala has been better as of late, but anybody can beat Hoya right now in terms of how he's playing, and Missing was also fine in terms of an engaged threat. He was definitely a positive to the team, but maybe not as much as the rest of this squad was. For JDG, you're still looking at them as a top 3 team, at least in my opinion. I think there's a big cluster in the middle of the LPL standings after top 2, but JDG to me feel like the team with by far the most upside out of everybody else in that group. That's why I've kept them at number 3, despite the fact that they've been losing some series to teams that are certainly not nearly as good as they are. I think if you can count on Pays being able to carry games, if Shun and Scout are stepping up and playing fine, even if Ala and Missing aren't very good, like, that's good enough to be 3rd in the LPL right now. And then for Thunder Talk on the other side, this team is going to be super doomed if Beishwan is gone, and spoiler alert, he is gone from this team. If Zhao Huangren or whoever they want to end up playing in the jungle ends up being their jungler for the rest of this split, it is over for them. Like, they have gone from being a team that can be a sneaky, interesting upset candidate, very similar to WE or FPX here in Group Ascend, to being a team that's just by far the worst in Group Ascend because nobody else in this team is going to be able to carry. 1xN and Feather started out this year pretty hot. They have crashed back down to earth, and I hate to kind of say this is a good take for me, but once again, I've been a 1xN hater over the course of this channel's history. He's going to get dead of the series here. This is what happens when this guy plays against the best AD carries in the world. He just gets absolutely trounced. And I'm not trying to say that he's a bad player. I just think he's a average to slightly above average AD carry at the LPL level, and people really want him to be better than that, and I just don't think that he is. Now, again, I want to reiterate, this isn't a great situation here on Thunder Talk. Hoya and Satab might be the 2 worst players in their role in the entire region. Feather, I don't think, played all that well, but 1xM was so clearly the worst player on the Rift here, and Pays so clearly outplayed him in the AD carry matchup that it would be disingenuous for me not to point it out, and not to say that I didn't see this coming, right? Like, 1xN is just a player that I don't expect to ever be able to compete at the top of the LPL. That was kind of the case here. If you want to blame Feather more, that's your prerogative. I think that that's fair. Zhao Huangren got super outplayed in this series in the jungle. Again, I want to give him some grace and some leeway because it was his first series on Thunder Talk, but wasn't a very good look, him going up against Shun. He looked very outclassed. Satab is the worst mid laner in the region. This dude can't do anything after that weird random series he had against Knight in the winter split where he actually played really well. Hoya, now that lane swaps are gone, is dead in the water. And even this was like one of his better series because he was on isolated champions. It's just not a good look for Thunder Talk. This might be a team that's worse than the upper echelon of Group Nirvana teams after Beishuan left, and that's just a really bad place to be. And then for JD Gaming, again, I hate to say that their entire team revolves around Paze because I don't think it does. I think Paze is their best player, but you kind of know that Paze is going to be good. Their entire team revolves around Shun and Scout. If those two win in the middle of the map, if they're able to get advantages, Paze is going to be good enough to be a primary carry in those games, and so you can pretty reliably think that JDG is going to be able to beat almost anybody, but if Shun and Scout aren't winning, and especially if All In missing or running it down, they're still going to be inconsistent. I love this win for them, but it's not surprising. But then moving on to our second series of day number 3, and it's another very interesting clash between Invictus Gaming and Weibo Gaming, where Weibo is once again going to keep their hot streak going. They're going to pick up the 2-1 series win. They were the better team pretty clearly in this one, and once again, it's the Weibo style really coming in clutch, and I hate to say it, but once again, it's the Invictus Gaming style really coming in as anti-clutch. They do not know how to win games consistently at this level, and I can't say I'm surprised. I was honestly shocked that they really went through with this roster. Not surprised in the sense that I thought it was a bad idea, just shocked that I think, the expectations were that this team was guaranteed going to get top 2 or top 3 in terms of how everyone was talking about them. This is old Weibo Gaming in terms of inconsistency, and we're going to talk about it. It's bled into every single part of where this team is at. But for Weibo, player of the series is once again going to go to Tian. What a great week for him so far. He really has been excellent. I think that Game 3 is probably going to get a bit overshadowed by Breathe, who just decimated a bad matchup on the top side, which is very noteworthy, but Tian was the driving force for Weibo Gaming in this series. I don't even think that's really all that up for debate, especially, again, in game number 1 on the Skarner. At this point, I'm starting to believe that Tian just can't have this champion. He's looking too consistent on it, and the way that he plays the game, again, that super greedy, look for everything kind of style, that's where Skarner really functions well, because Skarner can get away with playing a lot greedier than a lot of the other junglers can. It's why he's always been very good on things like Sejuani as well, so credit to Tian. I think he's great in those scenarios, but the Poppy game in game 3 I think is really what seals this for me. Again, I think a lot of people are going to look at the Gnar for Breathe and really kind of point out that I think the Poppy was the most important champion in that third and final game, and it really shut down everything Invictus wanted to do. So once again, credit to Tian. He really has been excellent, but you can't not shout out Breathe for dominating that game number 3. The Shy is back. Like, this is the version of him that left in the LPL a couple of years ago. That's always been there in the LPL, and we're going to talk about it. Trust me, I'm certainly not going to shy away from the conversation, pun entirely intended, but Breathe decimated him in this series, and I'm willing to call Breathe the second best top laner in the LPL right now. Bin has been super disappointing for Bilibili, and that spot is entirely wide open. Flandra, I think, is right up there as well. I don't think Flandra's been quite as good as he was at the beginning of the year, but, Breathe, Flandra, 369. Those are the 3 best top laners in the LPL in terms of production at the current moment, and Breathe kind of proving that once again in game number 3. Other things to take away, Xiaohu was fine. I think his scoreline's worse than maybe he played, but Rookie is definitely back in form, and I think he's found his style once again. Now that he's picking things like Azir a bit more consistently, I think things are starting to work out a bit more for him, but the Silas game in game 2 was also really nice. We already talked about Light and Era. Nothing has really changed from day number 2 in terms of the conversation surrounding them. Weibo Gaming is a team that's really built through the middle of the map and the top of the map for them, and if they're going to be able to generate advantages there, it's going to be pretty smooth sailing, all things considered, for them. And for Invictus on the other side, this team is so predictable in the fact that they are unpredictable and that they're just going to run it down. A lot of the time, the Shy is going to get dead of the series because obviously he played Renekton into Gnar and got absolutely decimated in game number 3. I get that game 2 existed, that the Ornn was really good. All things considered, I think that it's one of his better games in quite a long time, but anybody who continues to be surprised that this is the version of the Shy that we are getting here in spring of 2025 just doesn't understand who this player is. I absolutely believe that this is who he has always always been. Go back and watch these videos that I've been making since 2021 on this channel. I've talked about the Shy a lot over the course of the LPL history. There is a reason that I've just said, if it's not a major international tournament, don't count on him to be good. Like, and don't even count on him to be average in any circumstance. It's just not going to happen. This guy is a dirty inter throughout a majority of the regular season, and that's what he's been. He's been negative for this team overall, certainly much more negative than positive across Invictus's split. If they had a more stable top laner, I think this team would be moving in the right direction, because other players on this team are playing better. Rookie is certainly playing better right now than he has been in recent months, and that's a really good sign. He started out this year really bad, and I think he's starting to figure out that if he simplifies things down to playing Azir or Orianna, again, things actually start to work out for him. Gala has been fine. I certainly don't think he's been great, but he's been fine. Mako has been awful for this team, but he wasn't in this game, and then Jeja has been the carry of this team, but he was kind of bad in this series, and so you can just rely on the fact that everything's going to get flipped all that regularly for Invictus, and it just is who they are, right? Like, this team has all the potential in the world to be top 2 or top 3, and they might still get there because you get hot around playoff time. They can win any playoff series. They can win the LPL, but it's just so hard to rank them there because they can also lose to anybody in the LPL at any given time. And we kind of saw that here, but Weibo earning that top 4 spot. I felt pretty good about putting them above Invictus after last week, regardless of how good Invictus looked at the end of the week, because I really believed in Weibo Gaming, and they're paying that back out and then some. I'm really excited to see that Tion in particular is getting into form. I think he's the key to unlock more things for Weibo, but, you know, just as we talk about Invictus being predictably unpredictable, Weibo is never going to go on a hot streak for the entirety of a split. It's only a matter of time before they start to cool off, but at least for now, we'll enjoy it while it lasts. Then moving on now to day number 4, our middle day here in the LPL in week number 5, and we had a matchup between FunPlus Phoenix and Top Esports to kick off day number 4, and again, this one kind of going as you would expect. Top Esports picking up the 2-0 win, pretty dominant from them, not really all that concerned with where they're going to stand in terms of their performances. You can say what you want, again, about their international showings. They've always been dominant domestically, and they continued to be here. FPX is a good team, but they're good in the sense that they can take advantage of other teams' mistakes. If the other team is playing well, especially in Group Ascend, they're probably just gonna lose. Like, that's who FPX is. They're gonna be the team that beats up on the ones struggling and the team that really struggles against the teams that are actually doing well, and that's kind of what we saw here. I'll get into more specifics of where I think that ends up landing, because I think a couple of players are playing better or worse than maybe I've been giving them credit for on this channel, and I'm happy to kind of explain that. But for Top Esports on the other side, player of the series for me is gonna go to Jackie Love down in the bot lane, mostly for that Zeri game in game number 2. Zeri Yumi is really good. Like, I don't want that to be the case, and I don't really like that being the case, but I think especially when we start talking about the new patch coming out, and obviously the new map, and the objective timers changing, and things getting a little bit slower naturally, I think Zeri Yumi could be the bot lane in pro play again if they really wanted it to be, or if teams really wanted to index into that. God, I hope that that's not the case. And honestly, me saying it on the channel feels like, you know, maybe shooting a little too close to the sun, we'll just say, but, you know, Jackie Love playing it here absolutely dominated. If you can get one of the best AD carries in the world onto Zeri and really enable that player right now, this champ is really strong, and I think people are just kind of a little behind the times on hyper carries coming back in. We've seen them be very successful so far in their limited appearances. I would expect that to continue, and Jackie Love definitely was the main character of these games, but you do got to give a lot of credit to the rest of this team as well. Crisp, I think, has been awesome over the past couple of weeks. Yumi duty is never the most glamorous or flashy thing in the world, but it definitely works. Like, if it's effective, it's effective. Like, that's all you can really say about it. And then I think 369 is probably not going to get enough credit for how good he played, or how well he played, I should say, in this series, especially on the Rumble in game number 1. It really felt like he took over that game and he earned that player of the game performance. You know, this was a chaotic, you know, not clean kind of win for Top Esports. They can kind of function back and forth between these, you know, chaotic bangers where they pick up a bunch of kills, and also these more like standard games where they're a little bit more tempo oriented. They can do both, and this was definitely the more chaotic variation of it. Part of that was 369 really thriving in that environment and taking over in terms of his equalizers on Rumble. He's been the best top laner in the LPL. Again, him and Flandre, I think, are duking it out for it. Breathe is kind of close in that argument, but I would take 369 over everybody right now in terms of the performances he's offering. Kanavi still running away with MVP, regardless of the fact that he hasn't been the main character in the past couple of series, and Cream was awesome here, way better than Care on the other side. Top Esports is just the best team domestically right now. There's only one team, in my opinion, in the entire league that's even close to being on their level, and that's Anyone's Legend. Everybody else else feels like they are at least a tier below. And for FPX, it might even be 2 tiers below in terms of their actual gameplay. I like FPX. I'm certainly not going to try and, be super negative towards them. This is a more expected result than them beating Bilibili earlier in the week because they're supposed to be one of the worst teams in Group Ascend, but this was just an outclassing. They put up a good fight, though. They definitely stayed active and aggressive. I want to give a ton of credit specifically to Care, who I thought had a really good series and maybe isn't going to get as much credit for it as some other players will. Awesome was fine in the bot lane. I just get so frustrated with him because he's so willing to give up his life for nothing. Like, he has okay mechanics and he understands where he's supposed to be for the most part, but he just has this switch in his brain that flips that kind of tells him, like, now is the time I need to sack 1-for-1, and I don't like that playstyle for an AD carry on a team where you have other playmakers, where players like Jway and Sheer and Shadow and even Care have been really good as fight starters. You, especially on things like Kog'Maw, just need to be follow through and follow up. He had so much gold and so much damage on that champion, and yet was constantly willing to lay down his life by stepping up and stepping forward to try to get out as much damage as possible. I just think a little bit of patience would go a long way for him as a player, and it continues to really frustrate me. But the rest of the team, honestly, take it or leave it in terms of performances. Sheer was not nearly as good as 369 on the other side. No real surprise there. Shadow was not as relevant in this series as he has been, although I think he was generally fine. And then dud of the series for me is unfortunately going to go to Jway. This is mostly for the Nautilus in game number 1, where I thought he was actually atrocious. Like, he played that game miserably. Game 2, it was fine. It is what it was. It was him playing Lulu when his Kog'Maw was actively trying to get himself killed at every possible exchange. But, Jway, I think for the most part just needs to get a bit more consistent in terms of the game-to-game. I think we've seen what he can do as a playmaker when he gets tempo. It's not always as clean when he doesn't get tempo. That was the reason we were more up and down on him in 2024 as a player. So, overall, FPX is who we thought they were as a team, and Top Esports is who we thought they were as a team as well. Like, this is the most consistent and strongest team in the LPL right now, going up against a team that's good at pulling off surprise victories, but doesn't really do that against teams that are actually showing up on the given day. This is the result you would have anticipated, and it was a little bit more fun than maybe we thought it would be. Then moving on to the second series of day number 4, and we already got the first of the top 2 teams in the first series. It's time to get the other one. It's Anyone's Legend taking on Invictus Gaming, and AL decimates this series. It's not particularly close. This is an absolute destruction from AL, especially that game number 1, a 0-kill game for Invictus. They just look completely outclassed in every area that could possibly be pointed out, and AL, to their credit, has been utterly dominant over the past couple of weeks. I think in terms of just raw form, how these teams are winning games, it's really hard for me to say that AL is not the best team in the LPL because of just the way that they're winning, but they still have to be able to overcome their Top Esports demon to really be able to lay claim to that stake. Obviously, they're going to have the opportunity to do so once again here in the double round robin, but they need to do it because it's really the only thing holding them back. I think Tarzan, Kale, back-to-back AL players of the week in the last couple of weeks, and honestly, it might go to the top side when we get around to the end of this video, because Flandra, once again, is going to get a player of the series. All this talk about Breathe and 369 and, these players playing so well at the beginning of this week, we can't forget that Flandra has been probably the most productive top laner in the league. Do we project that entirely going forward? I think that's kind of up to your personal interpretation, your personal preferences, but I certainly can't begrudge anybody for saying that he is the best top laner in the LPL right now. He certainly made his claim to be up there. The Aurora game in game number 1 was super flashy, and he was able to really take over with his damage. Everybody won in game number 1, though. I think the thing that really gets him this player of the series for me is that game 2 on the Sejuani top. It's not just Sejuani top, it's Rod of Ages Sejuani top lane. I'm not a top lane player, so I don't know if this is a thing. Like, is Roa Sejuani top a thing that people are playing? I'd be really interested to hear if this is like a solo queue thing that Flandra is just bringing in to the LPL, but at the very least, this is an insane counter to Jace, and it very much ended up working out. I wouldn't be surprised to see this more going forward, because it actually did a ton. Not only was he able to, be that big utility CC bot, great skirmisher that Sejuani just naturally is, especially later on in the game, but he was doing a lot more damage than a traditional Sejuani would because of that Roa. And so I'm interested to see if people have really theory crafted this and kind of built out a nice pathway into it, or if it makes a lot of sense in other matchups, or if it's just this specific scenario for AL. But it really worked here. And honestly, I was really impressed considering it's not something I've ever really thought about before. So I'd be interested to see if it happened again. But Flandra's far from the only player you can shout out in this series. I think it goes back to the traditional subjects, Tarzan and Kale down in the support position. They've been the two best players for AL across this year, maybe outside of Flandra, right? Like those three to me have been carrying things. Hope has been excellent, but mostly as a follow-up to whoever is creating in that particular game, whether it's Tarzan or Kale or Flandra on the top side. But to me, it's been those two. Tarzan and Kale are the backbone, the core of what AL has been able to accomplish so far in 2025. Tarzan, as you guys know, is the best jungler in the world, in my opinion, and I think he once again followed that up. We gotta stop giving this guy Neferi. It just can't keep happening. He can't keep getting away with it. Judge has been pretty good this year. He got mega outclassed in this series, and then Kale is just unreal. Mako's not even been close to the level that Kale has been at in 2025 so far, and I think there's a strong argument and a strong case to be made that he is the best support right now in the LPL. So just a lot going right for AL on that front. Hope continues to be great. Shanks ends up going deathless. He's gotten into better form, I would say, in the back half of this split, which is against his traditional norms. He usually gets worse as the split gets longer. It's nice to see him really ramping up now and kind of just outplaying Rookie in the mid lane. Everything just working for AL. This is the team to beat outside of Top Esports, and they might even be the team to beat in the LPL, depending on what happens later on in the week. But for Invictus on the other side, man, this team is frustrating to watch when things are going poor, and you know what? That happens a lot more than you would want it to on this team. The Shy is going to get yet another dead of the series. He's very close to leading the entire LPL in those so far in the spring split. It's just been worst case scenario for him. There's really nothing else to say. Everything is going wrong for the Shy, and I can't say I'm surprised. Like the Gwen, the Jace, all of it didn't work here. Flandra was definitely the better of these two top laners. He had no actual answer, and he continued to step up and die over and over again. There's just nothing else to say about the Shy at this point. There's really nowhere else to go in terms of this conversation. He's legitimately one of the worst players in Group Ascend, certainly one of the most detrimental to his individual team, and this team is not going to be consistent ever with him on the roster. Maybe the highs are still going to be there. Who knows? Maybe he steps it up in the playoffs and goes to Worlds and pops off like he did for Weibo Gaming in 2023. It's just hard to believe that that version of him is, gonna get there in the first place. He's gonna have to go through an entire gauntlet in the playoffs to even get there because of just how poor he's performing right now. That is, if he gets there at all. They are gonna likely have to play a best of 5 to get into playoffs with the way that he is dragging them down. But it's not just him. Jeja has started to play a little bit worse. He has had a very bad start to week number 5, in my opinion. You've got Rookie, who I think had one of his weaker series in a while. Mako's been one of the worst supports in the Group Ascend. It's just all going wrong for Invictus. There's really nothing positive to take away from this series. Gala's scoreline looks fine, but it's not like he did anything in this series. He got enabled, but everybody lost. Invictus didn't lose 21-0 in 28 minutes in game number 1 on accident. Like, they're just getting completely outplayed by the teams that are actually good at this level, and I think it's getting exposed that they're just not consistent. That being said, they're probably going to bounce back next week and all of a sudden look fantastic, because that's just what this team and that's just what these players end up doing. For now, I can only grade them on what they're showing at the moment, which is very, very bad, but who knows, man? Like, it's just so hard to predict where Invictus is at. And then for anyone's legend on the other side, this is one of the two teams that are really, like, the teams to beat in the LPL. Top Esports and AL are so far above everybody else, in my opinion. JD Gaming's the only team that I think even has the talent to broach that gap, but AL might even be that number 1 team right now. Then moving on now to day number 5, and day 5 I was on the cast for, and so I'm going to keep these a little bit shorter, because if you want to know my full thoughts, you can go watch me watch the games and cast them on the LPL English channel. But the first one was huge. It is our first elimination series of the entire year. Whoever loses this is mathematically done and will not be participating in this summer split. It's a matchup between OMG and Royal Never Give Up. That RNG is going to be able to take 2-1. They're going to survive by the skin of their teeth. They're not out of elimination. I'm not trying to say that they've saved themselves just yet or anything like that, but with this loss, OMG is officially out of split number 3. Their year is not done because they get to finish out the rest of the spring split. They get to finish out the rest of split 2 here, but they're done. They are mathematically eliminated. They will be bottom 2 in Group Nirvana, which means no split 3, no summer split. After May, they don't play a single game the rest of the year. I don't know if this means that the org is going to be done. I don't know what it's going to look like. They're not going to have any income for the rest of 2025, and so I imagine that it's going to be pretty difficult to continue to operate as an esports organization, but for such a storied org like OMG, and even like such a storied matchup here, OMG and RNG, going back to 2013 and 14, which I talked about on the broadcast, it's just crazy to see both of these orgs in this situation, but RNG lives to fight another day. Their path is harder than OMG's moving forward, and so maybe you feel a little bit worse about them winning this than you would have if OMG ended up winning it, but RNG kind of proving that OMG is the worst team in the league, even with their roster change. So again, we'll quickly get into it. If you really want a full breakdown of this, again, I watched the games live. I casted them live. If you want to know my thoughts, go check those out, but Tong Yuan is going to be my player of the series. Not really all that up for debate. He was dominant in game number 1, super aggressive, constantly the primary, playmaker and facilitator on the team, starting every fight. On the Ahri, just like spirit dashing in and like creating a lot of havoc in terms of what he was doing. It was really great to see, and then eventually the Aurelion Sol got online in game number 3. This was a very obvious player of the series from my perspective. I think you also really got to shout out Niket, who I thought was really good as a playmaker and a facilitator here. Jiachi was fine. Milky Way was fine. Xiaoshu was even fine on the top side. Xiaoshu made a couple of really nice plays. This was probably his best split, or his best series of the split up until this point. So that was really nice to see. But overall, all of the games were kind of blowouts in favor of the team that ended up winning. RNG just looked the best in game number 3, which is always the best time to look like it. If this team wants to stay alive, they got to keep this momentum going. It's nice to see that Tong Yuan is able to put out these kinds of performances and is able to lead the team at a pretty, big time, because he is somehow, some way the senior member of RNG at this point, but he's going to have to keep it up. He's had a couple of good games, but has not been able to string anything together really over the course of his entire career. I don't really expect that to change. And then for OMG, it's just sad. Beishong comes in here as the starting jungler to replace Hang. This was like a last-ditch effort they had, throwing something at the wall to try and get it to stick. Beishong hasn't played since 2023. He didn't play at all last year, and this is a guy who's obviously had some experience playing in big pressure situations for WE in the past, but, has been a big replacement for IG in the past as well. Like, he's been an LPL player. He just hasn't been in recent years, and so I get maybe bringing him in, seeing what you can get from him. It just didn't really end up working out. I don't think all of it was entirely his fault. I actually think he was probably the best player on his team in this series. It just didn't really end up mattering. Dud of the series for me is going to go to Moham in the support position. He did not have a good split, especially coming off of a Worlds appearance last year, which I think some people are going to forget, some people are going to remember because they really were not fans of his game. It's just one of those things where you look at him and you go, yeah, he kind of was a rel one-trick last year. Fearless made that a lot more difficult, and generally speaking, he's on a much worse team, which means much worse performances, but he did not have a good year, and he is a reason why this team is going, down, and why they're, why this will be their last split. Not their last series, but their last split. The one player on this team that you have to feel entirely bad for is Starry in the bot lane. He more than deserves time to develop in the LPL, but he's just not going to get it because his team is simply not good enough. He is a very interesting AD carry prospect. I would take Starry over a lot of the other AD carries in Group Ascend right now that people are calling like the next up-and-comers. Players like 1XM, players like Awesome. Like, I would take Starry over both of them in terms of who they are as players. I just think it's unfortunate that he's stuck here on OMG, and he can't quite have that same magic that he had last summer when this team was in Group Nirvana in a similar situation. Charlotte was unfortunately thrust into a situation that he was never going to be properly prepared for. He was always going to be a downgrade to Lin Fang. It was a shock at the time that they made that decision. It continues to be a surprise, and Harry is now also, of course, done, but he definitely more than deserves it. He is not an LPL caliber top laner. We've seen that for quite a while. OMG tried their best to stay alive, and it just didn't happen. Again, they're not done. They're going to have one more series against Ultra Prime to see if they can go out on a bang, but no matter the result of that series, they will be eliminated as a bottom 2 team here in the spring split, and RNG technically stays alive. Their final series is against EDG, which is certainly not an easier matchup. They're going to have to win that and hope for an Ultra Prime loss to OMG to even have a chance of staying alive, but technically their path is at least clear to them in terms of how things end up going. It is possible for them to stay alive. They just need to show that they can perform like this more frequently in order for us to believe it. Then moving on to our second series of day number 5, and like I said, also commentated this one, so full thoughts are in the description. It's Bilibili Gaming taking on Weibo Gaming, and you might recognize these two teams facing off against each other. That's because they already did in this video this week, but the tides have turned. The tables are not the same as they were before. A new jungler has entered the arena for Bilibili Gaming, and it's Bei Xuan, the former starting jungler for Thunder Talk. They have picked him up as their new starting jungler, and it's paying dividends at the very least in this first series. They dropped to Weibo earlier this week. They don't really have any tempo on the top side of the map. Bin and Wei both look atrocious in that matchup, and they come back here and they show this is a new look version of this team by picking up games 2 and 3 in pretty dominant fashion and just looking fantastic. Weibo really had no answers, and Weibo was white hot heading into this series, so to see them drop so I'm not going to say effortlessly because Weibo obviously did a great job of winning game number 1, but to see Bilibili come out here and win so effortlessly in games 2 and 3, super impressive. This was not something that they were capable of doing with Wei in as their starting jungler, so to see that it's even an option for them right now is really encouraging. And I think the most encouraging thing is just how enabled the rest of the team felt with Beixuan in the jungle. And we're going to talk about it. There's some pretty easy takeaways from me. Xin Zhao, maybe not the style that BLG are looking for. Skarner, Sejuani, definitely the style that BLG are looking for, and it makes these solo laners look like $1 million. Knight is going to get player of the series for me, even though Beixuan came in and really reinvigorated this team. Knight was the guy in this series, especially on the Akali in game number 3. I think the most important part of Beixuan coming in over Wei is that he's going to be able to play Sejuani and Skarner a little bit better and a little bit more consistently than someone like Wei was able to do, and that's just best case scenario, because when BLG is looking at how do we win games, it's not through jungle, it's through Knight and Elk and On and Bin being able to dominate in the way that they were able to dominate last year. You don't need your jungler to come in and be a primary carry option. You need him to come in and be able to make sure that the best players in the world can get all the resources they need to carry games, and that's what Beixuan did at a great level. So Knight's getting player of the series because that Akali game was insane. He just outplayed Xiaohu, who was, on fire, as we talked about. The King of Spring was living up to his moniker, and obviously, played pretty well in this series. I'm certainly not going to complain about how Xiaohu ended up playing because I think he did a great job. Knight was just better. He outplayed him, so really great stuff on that front. Bin had his best series in a very long time. This dude got massacred by Breathe earlier on in the week. Like, it was not a close matchup, and this time he definitely got the better of him, which is huge. Beixuan definitely still deserves a shout-out. It's not like he wasn't the better jungler in this series. The Skarner was excellent in game number 2 as an engaged threat, really finding a lot of those pick angles that I think BLG were looking for, and Sejuani was still great in game 3. Again, we kind of look past the Xin Zhao in game number 1. It's not necessarily his style, but everything did end up working out. And then On looked, super unlocked here. Elk was solid. You don't really have any complaints when it comes to BLG. I think everything really ended up working out for them in this series. And for Weibo on the other side, obviously it's not ideal that you ended up losing this, but it is kind of understandable that you ended up losing this because you're going into a jungler that you didn't really know how he was going to perform or how he was going to click with the rest of the team. What was his strategy going to be? Where was he going to go with resources? I get why that wasn't exactly as easy for you to figure out, and Tian, in particular, really struggled with that in this series. It's why he's getting dead of the series for me. The Poppy, the Maokai, they just didn't really end up working out, but I think there are other options. Tian was excellent throughout the rest of the week, and so I'm not going to criticize him too heavily, but Breathe, I think, deserved dead of the series, was certainly in the running for me. Era was in the running for me for dead of the series. Even Xiaohu was in the running, even though I think he played fine, and there were moments where I thought he was okay. Weibo just kind of felt outclassed on multiple different levels throughout this series, and that's just not really what you wanted to see. But again, I'm going to give them a bit of a pass because this new look Bilibili Gaming, they feel reinvigorated. Not only did it feel like this was a big upgrade in the jungle, because I do think it is, at least a decently sized upgrade in the jungle in terms of just how the cohesion ended up fitting for BLG, but Weibo also didn't have time to prep, and there was this inherent, new player boost that it seems like every single team is getting when they switch rosters. So for now, Weibo losing this, not going to freak me out. They looked so good before this series. I have to imagine they're still in good form. And then for Bilibili, hopefully this just means that they are back into, competing to be a top 3 or a top 4 team in the LPL, because they haven't been in recent weeks. If the addition of Beixuan gets them there, then, I'm going to be really excited about that. Then moving on now to day number 6, and we kicked day 6 off with a very interesting outcome. It was Team WE taking on Ninjass in Pyjamas, and WE is going to pick up the 2-0 series win. They're not going to drop a single game in this series. WE has really started to look good. They ended up picking up 3 wins last week in week number 4, jumping all the way up to number 8 in my power rankings. They are probably going to go even higher after this week because they pick up another big win, this time over a team who is very much in freefall mode right now in Ninjass in Pyjamas, who just can't seem to find anything at the current moment. It just feels like everything is going wrong for them, and no amount of roster changes they make will change that. They are the first team to, I believe, make a big roster change like this and just lose. I know OMG did it earlier in the week, but that felt like a different situation. Solo Kill coming in had a good outcome. He played fine. He was just as good as his opposition, was probably one of the more valuable players on the team, and it just did not end up mattering. The team could not overcome their inherent problems to even pick up a win against a team like WE, who, yes, is really soaring right now, but is not a team that is unbeatable at this level by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not a good result for Ninjas in Pyjamas. So we'll talk about it. Player of the series is kind of up for debate here. I think a lot of people want to give it to Monkey in the jungle. I think that that's totally understandable. I think he was really good on the Skarner and really on the Lilia in game number 2. He had a good series, but I'm giving it to Vampire in the support position. Am I coming around on Vampire? Are we suddenly taking a full 180 turn on this channel? Not quite yet. I still haven't been sold that Vampire is going to be able to keep this level of success up, but what was my biggest complaint about Vampire when he was a rookie last year, or even really at the beginning of the year this year, is, oh, this guy clearly just looks like he doesn't know what to do when things fall apart, when things aren't going well for him. Well, turns out if you just get your team into good situations, you don't really got to worry about that too much, and I think inherently, now that he's spent more time in the LPL, gotten more reps, and gotten more opportunities to actually play out these games, he's in a situation now where he can, really start to function a little bit better. He was thrust in to starting as Edward Gaming support because they lost Mako last year, at the end of the offseason, and he wasn't ready. This is a guy who had barely played any competitive leading up to last year. I think the reps have really done him good, and he's gotten a lot more comfortable playing at this level, and now a lot of that positivity is coming out. Those team fights on the Alistair in game number 2 were absolutely gorgeous in terms of some of the engages he had. Certainly the most aesthetically pleasing player on WE. But again, if you want to give it to Monkey in the jungle, I think that that's totally fine. Pretty big jungle gap in this series. Again, we'll talk about Aki, but Monkey has been the change of pace that WE needed. To me, he's the best player on this team, although Taiyun is certainly making a case for that down in the bot lane right now. This guy's been hyper consistent as a carry. Scrim Taiyun is starting to come out on stage, which is just very entertaining, very funny to talk about. Karis was fine here. I certainly think he was better in this series than he has been recently. Cube was stable on the top side. That's something he's starting to grow into being again, very similar to Rare Adam Cube from 2020. It's nice to see that he still has that in the tank, but overall, things just getting better for WE. I still don't know what this team's ceiling looks like, but they picked up more than enough wins across the last couple of weeks to show that it's not a fluke, that it's not just happening randomly. This is a team you have to watch out for in a similar vein to a team like FPX, who they're above in my power rankings, mind you, but for Ninjas in Pyjamas, everything is going wrong for this team right now. I hate to say it, but it really does remind me of Group Ascend last year in the summer split, where this team just could not find any semblance of success. I think they actually went winless in terms of their series score. They are lucky that they ended up playing WE at the beginning of Group Ascend to not have that happen, but clearly this team is just fundamentally broken in a way where not one roster change is going to be able to come in and fix it, because Solo Kill was fine here. And for those of you who didn't watch my content last year, I was actually decently high on Solo Kill. I think that there is something here to build around. I don't think he's the most dominant lane player or anything like that, but I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, and I think this is a good addition for the team, even if Shanji was in better form, I think, the last couple of series than he was at the beginning of the year. I think Solo Kill is a perfectly fine player to pick up and give a shot. Maybe not in Group Ascend, like I would prefer if this was a Group Nirvana team, giving Solo Kill a shot, but at the end of the day, I think he's a player that deserves to at least have a chance in the LPL from what we've seen in his limited time, and he was fine in this series, maybe a bit over-aggressive on the Gwen, certainly, but, he was doing a lot on the top side and certainly trying to bring back some resources, but Aki is just not good enough in the jungle. He's going to get dud of the series once again. They replaced him last year, and that was kind of the catalyst for them getting back into form in Group Ascend, going into the playoffs in summer of last year. They might have to do it again. Is Leon still available? I get that he probably still has to serve that 2-game suspension from the beginning of the year, but Aki is just not doing it, man. It's clear at this point. If you're going to replace Shanji on the top side, one of the big reasons you brought Aki in was that synergy with Shanji. To me, there's nothing else tethering him to this team. If the decision is now to move away from that top side, Aki has to be a part of that decision as well. If you can find a jungler to promote, that's always the if when it comes to decisions like this. Maybe if RNG really feel like they're out of it, Milky Way is available. I don't know, right? You're throwing anything at the wall if you're Ninjas in Pyjamas at this point. But the rest of this team is not playing great. Doanby makes a couple of mistakes, and the game is just kind of out of hand. I'm certainly not blaming him for this series, but it is what it is. Leave's performance has completely fallen off. When this team started playing a lot worse, his mental just completely tanked. PP God has not really been all that good all year long. It's just not looking good for Ninjas in Pyjamas right now. They feel like one of, if not the weakest team in Group Ascend, and that is not a good place to be. Again, you want to stack them up against Thunder Talk? That's unfortunately the company that they are keeping right now. They're not even on the same level as WE and FunPlus Phoenix, which is just utterly disappointing. But this is a big win for WE. Again, it proves that last week was not a fluke, that they are on the right track. They're going in the right direction, and they could be a team that you have to watch out for. I don't think this is a team that's going to be super dangerous in terms of breaking into top 6 or anything like that, but could they be a playoff team? Right now, they're on pace to do so, and I'm really excited about that. Then moving on to our second series of day number 6, and this is the final one that I commentated across this week. It was Bilibili Gaming taking on FunPlus Phoenix, and BLG keeps their new hot streak going by picking up yet another 2-1 series win. Now, dropping a game to FPX is certainly not the best thing in the world. You would have hoped for a tad bit more consistency on that front, but this was still a really good series from BLG. I think we're nitpicking if we're looking at game number 2 and saying that that represents who BLG is. I think that they once again went against their own personal instinct. They picked Xinjiao, Galio, this really skirmish-heavy, aggressive, like mid-jungle duo that doesn't play into Beishuan's strengths, and the moment they started picking things like Skarner and Sejuani and just allowing their solo laners or their laners, including Elk, to carry games, all of a sudden it became a lot easier. And for FPX, once again, I'm going to reiterate the thing that I've said a bunch of times on this channel, not only already in this video, but throughout the entirety of the 2025 season, that FPX is the team that's going to be able to beat the teams that make mistakes. They're not going to be able to beat the teams that are playing well, that are playing up to their own individual standards. It's just not who FPX is. It's not who they're ever going to be, and I think that's just what we have to live with. BLG came to play today, and that's why they ended up coming out on top. So, again, we will quickly go over it. Knight is going to get my player of the series. Mazel's crash out when he didn't get player of the game for game number 1 was phenomenal and very fun to watch, but it is actually absurd that Knight didn't get a player of the game for game number 1 on the Zed. They ended up making up for it by giving it to him in game number 3 when he didn't deserve it, when Elk popped off on the Kai'Sa in that final fight to really win them that game. But Knight was probably the best player on the team in this series. The Zed game was just so gorgeous. It really was phenomenal, and it's not like the Victor game was any worse, right? He just is really good, and I think this is the consequence, the outstanding factor of what happens when you introduce someone like Beishuan to the team is now Knight is unlocked. It's not just like, oh, Knight's a good player. Oh, Knight's the best player in the world again. That's the kind of version of him that you're hoping to get back out in the mid lane here, and he pulled it off by picking that Zed in game number 1 and completely taking over. So, really great stuff for him. Knight looks like he's completely back into form. You know, Beishuan was still excellent here on every game that wasn't the Xinjiao game. He was good on the Skarner in game number 1. I'm certainly not going to take anything away from him, but the fact that he got player of the game is indeed absurd. Bin has played infinitely better ever since Beishuan came in to the jungle. He was the best, or the better top laner in this series by a very large margin, completely shut down the Yorick in game number 3 and was very useful in the back half of those fights. Elk took over. The killer instinct at the end of game number 3 was gorgeous, and quite frankly, I considered Elk for player of the series entirely for that fight and for that play because it was like a game-breaking play for FPX, but it's probably the biggest play that Elk has made all split long. Really nice to see that. On continues to be very aggressive, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but again, Bilibili just looks so much more comfortable with this new style, and specifically the solo laners look like they're really unlocked because Beishuan has come in. And then for FPX on the other side, they're just not good enough to be able to go up against a Bilibili gaming team that feels confident and that feels like they can play their own individual style. You can kind of look across the map and across the board as to where things ended up going wrong for them. Sheer is going to get my dud of the series, mostly for that Yorick in game 3. I really valued this draft in game 3 because I thought the Yorick was going to be a huge issue that BLG had no easy way to solve in the back half of the game. Sheer was awful, 0-5 on the Yorick, just never really felt like he was in the game at all. He was much more relevant in game number 2 on the Mbessa, but it's just really hard for me to not give him dead of the series after that third game when he was so important to the comp and just didn't end up coming through for them. I think Shadow could be in the consideration, but he was fine. I think he especially was okay on the Pantheon in game number 1, tried to stay active, but just got out-tempoed because his lanes were losing. You know, Awesome continues to be a player that I'm just not impressed by in terms of his individual plays. Was good in game 2 on the Jinx, but he was entirely funneled by the rest of his team, so how much can you even really put on him? And Jue just never really got his feet under him. Kara was fine, not really good or bad in this series. FPX is FPX, not much to say about this team. Again, they're not going to be able to beat a good Bilibili team. They need Bilibili to make mistakes, and they just didn't make those here today. But credit to FPX for picking up a game. This team is fine. Like, they're probably top 8 right now with Ninjas and Pyjamas really struggling, but Bilibili's better than that. Hopefully, this is a team that's on their way to getting back into top 4. I'm not guaranteeing that that's going to happen as of right now. Weibo Gaming, even with their loss to them, is still in really good form, and it's really hard for me to kind of view that in a different way after one series, but, you know, if ever one change was going to facilitate that kind of change, it clearly is Beishuan coming into the jungle and really just completely blowing up BLG structure in a good way. Then moving on to our third series of day 6, our, mega day, if you will, here in the LPL, and the final series was Top Esports taking on Invictus Gaming, and Top Esports is going to pick up the 2-1 series win. Credit to IG for getting a game here. Not a lot of teams are able to consistently beat Top Esports, but it is very clear where the problems lie for Invictus at the current moment. This team cannot find any semblance of consistency, and unfortunately for them, it's like swapped who it is throughout the year, and it's really not good to see that. It's usually, a little bit more encouraging to see a team like JDG that at least has like clear players who are running it down and clear players who are carrying the team. But for Invictus, it's just random. You're like rolling a die on any given day on who is going to suck, and that's not really ideal. For Top Esports, they're way too good to give into that. Like, yes, they lost game number 1, but games 2 and 3 were not the hardest games in the world. Game 2 was definitely more back and forth, but Kanavi woke up on the Skarner in game number 3, and things became a lot easier. Player of the series for me, once again, going to go to Jackie Love in the bot lane. I think he's starting to heat up. He was not really, phenomenal at the start of the year. He was good. He was really good for this team in the playoffs in winter, but I don't think he was taking over games in the way that maybe you would expect for someone like Jackie Love. I think he is starting to get into that form, that JKL form that can really, break things open internationally, be the best AD carry in the LPL, that kind of form. I think he's slowly starting to get back there, and I think part of that is him playing more lane-dominant carries, things like Lucian, obviously pulling out in game number 3. He decimated this third game on Lucian. He looks like an absolute menace. Hopefully that's something that they can keep up. Crisp has looked a lot better as well, and so I think the facilitation of that bot lane 2v2 is going to be even more important for Top Esports. That's a big reason why they end up losing internationally, is that the bot lane can't really keep up the same style that they have domestically. Hopefully they're starting to grow into something that's going to be a bit more sustainable. Also got to shout out 369. This guy is just unreal, genuinely unbelievably good. I thought Cream was really good in this series. Kanavi, I think, maybe not quite as consistent in the first couple of games, specifically that game number 1, but by the time we got to game 3, he was completely out-jungling Jeje in the game that really mattered at the end of this series, and so you feel really good about Top Esports. They play on the final day as well, but, they look great. Everything you could want to see out of this team, they're showing, and for Invictus on the other side, I hate to say it's just the opposite. That feels like a pretty lazy way to describe it, but it is just kind of the opposite for Invictus right now, where everything is just going wrong. And like I said, you can kind of roll a die and just pick, a random one who's going to be the bad player today. Jeje has been the carry throughout a majority of this year, and he has started to play really bad over the past couple of weeks, and now, Rookie is starting to step up, but the one constant has been Mako, who's been a major underperformer, and he's the easy choice for dud of the series here. That might be the worst Blitzcrank game I've ever seen in game number 3. I can't believe this is happening to Mako. I called him the best support in the world last year, and I think in 2024, for Top Esports, he was the best support in the world. He was that jack of all trades, master of all kind of player. He was really good in lane, he was really good at facilitating the rest of the map, and it just has all fallen apart so far in 2025. I don't know if it's bad synergy or whatever, right? We thought the last Edward Gaming year in 2023 with Uzi in the bot lane was going to be the worst we ever saw Mako. No, this is infinitely worse than that. He is genuinely one of the most detrimental players in the league, and when you have that alongside the Shy, who you never know if he's ever even going to be playable on any given day, now Jeje's starting to play bad, Gala has not really been consistent, even with Rookie getting back into form. This team doesn't have any sort of grounded, players in order to keep themselves in a position where you feel good about them in any way, shape, or form. It's just all falling apart for Invictus. This could be a bottom 4 team in Group Ascend. This is a team that's almost certainly going to have to go through a best of 5 in order to qualify for playoffs, and you're telling me this team can't lose a best of 5? They absolutely could lose a best of 5, and depending on the record, they might have to play against a team like Ninjass and Pyjamas, who's had their number across all year long, so it's just not a good look for Invictus right now. Things are really falling apart for them, and they need to figure it out quickly because the split is rapidly approaching the end, and again, it's one series. All you got to do is lose one, and you're out. You're not in the playoffs at all to qualify for MSI, but for Top Esports, it's not something they're going to have to worry about. This is going to be one of the top teams. They're going to auto-qualify for the playoffs without needing to go through that best of 5, and they're still the favorites, at least for now, in the LPL. They're going to have a chance to back up that statement on the final day here on day 7, but at least through day number 6, they have proven to be number 1 in the LPL. But that's going to bring us to day number 7, our final day here in week number 5 of the LPL Spring Split. And we started off day 7 with a bit of a revenge game, even if it means nothing at this point. It's Ultra Prime taking on OMG, and OMG is going to pick up a 2-1 series win. Their only series win of the Group Nirvana stage, and their last hurrah, at least for 2025. This is the last series that this organization will be playing this year. They don't get another series. They've already gone through the round robin robin, the single round robin that Group Nirvana is, and that means that they are done because they're guaranteed a bottom 2 spot. It means no summer split, so obviously, it's exciting to see this team go out on top, but there's a very, very real chance that this is the last time we could see this organization ever in the LPL, in League of Legends, and if that's the case, it's definitely sad, but they went out on a good note with a victory for Ultra Prime. This is obviously a pretty bad loss. I'm not trying to sit here and be doomer or anything, but you are technically still in danger. If Ultra Prime lose out, and if RNG beat Edward Gaming, Ultra Prime's bottom 2. Like, that is a realistic scenario. You've got to be able to start picking up some wins somewhere. And honestly, this team played fine for parts of this series and then just completely fell off the map for the rest. It's really frustrating to watch, but let's talk about OMG, because really this series should be about OMG, even if it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things that they ended up picking up this victory. From a moral perspective, this is a fantastic victory for OMG. Charlotte is going to get my player of the series. It really felt like, he was the one that was driving forward a lot of the action here, way better than Saber on the other side in terms of consistency throughout a lot of the back half of this series, regardless of what Saber's KDA would tell you, but Charlotte was really good. I would argue this is easily the best that Charlotte has ever played in the LPL since being inserted at, I believe, the beginning of Group Nirvana. Like, it was definitely near the beginning. It wasn't exactly there. Lin Fang got a couple of games that he didn't play well in, but Charlotte's played most of Group Nirvana here for OMG and has never looked this good. It's really nice to see that this is at least in there for potential other teams moving forward, not only this year, but moving into next year, because you just never know what's going to happen with an organization when they don't play all year long. Beishang, I think, was much better than his KDA would indicate. He was the better jungler in this series, and I don't think that necessarily represents itself based on that KDA score, but he was really good here. Moham was really good in the support position. That Rakan game in Game 2 was absolutely stunning, and that's really awesome to see because Moham has kind of been considered a Rel 1 trick throughout a lot of his career. It's nice to see him shed that reputation at least a little bit. Starry was solid. Harry had one of his better series in a while on the top side. Everything just kind of clicked for OMG down the stretch, and they were the better performing team, but you've got to be frustrated if you're Ultra Prime because, like I said, this was the series that you really kind of needed to win. You can't really afford to be dropping series like this. If you end up losing out, you've got one more series left. If you end up dropping that and RNG picks up that win against Edward Gaming, now you're out. Like, you are on the chopping block, so you got to be very careful with how things go. And honestly, this team didn't show up here today. They didn't play particularly well. Their macro was pretty bad after game number 1, and their performances were pretty bad after game number 1. Wacko's gonna get dud of the series for me, mostly for that Ezreal in game number 2, because dude picked Ezreal to be a little bit safer in terms of the engages. You're looking at Mbessa, you're looking at Skarner, you're looking at Rakan, even Galio, right? Even Zaya, like if you really want to go there, like it's just engage after engage after engage on OMG. You pick Ezreal to try and be a little bit safer in that regard, and he just never utilized that, was constantly getting caught out over and over again in pretty pivotal moments. That's why he's getting done of the series, because I think the worst game was his game number 2 on the Ezreal, but Saber was not particularly good in the back half of this series. He got a pretty big lead on the Akali in terms of the gold and did absolutely nothing with it, was super inactive, was late to fights, really frustrating stuff. I think the one player that I do want to give like a positive shout out to is Jiang on the top side, who I think is starting to come along. I was a huge fan of his when he was in the PCS last year, and I was excited to see him come over here to the LPL. It's not necessarily been a great transition for him. He's been fine. He's just not been excellent. He's certainly not been the worst top laner in the league, but he's been better as of late, and I think that that's good. Junhao, I think, has moments, but lost on the Nefiri, a champion that he's really dominated on over the course of this split, as has everybody, but really specifically Junhao has found a ton of success on Nefiri. Xiaoxia was not great in the support position here. This isn't a good look for Ultra Prime. In fact, it's a pretty concerning look, all things considered, for Ultra Prime. So hopefully they're going to be able to get it together. But for OMG on the other side, at least they went out with a bang. At least they've, said, we're going out on our terms. And picking up their first series win of this entire stage in their last series is really cool. Who knows if we ever get to see this historic organization ever again in the LPL with them not making any revenue over the course of the rest of this year. But if this was the last hurrah, at least they went out on top. But that's going to bring us to our final series of the week, and boy, are we ending it on a banger. It is a top-of-the-table clash between Anyone's Legend and Top Esports. and anyone's legend is going to pick up a 2-0 series win. They don't drop a game at all in their victory here against the team that was #1 in the power rankings. I think all that was clear to me in this series is that if Top Esports isn't going to perform, AL is definitely going to step up, and they have the ability to take this series and to be the best team in the LPL. It's so exciting to see what anyone's legend has become, and obviously I'm not throwing out all of the tape on Top Esports or anything like that, nor am I anywhere close to what a lot of, Reddit or Twitter or, Twitch chat are kind of feeling about Top Esports. I'm not sitting here being like, oh God, I hope and pray that Top Esports don't go to MSI and represent the LPL again. I'm just not that kind of fan. If they're the team that ends up earning it, then they've earned it. That's just what it is at the end of the day. But to see anyone's legend kind of prove that they could be the best team in the LPL, that they are right now the best team in the LPL, it's really, really cool to see. And honestly, like we talk about, Top Esports kind of having their number as of late, AL had their number at the beginning of the year when they beat them in Demacia Cup, when they beat them in the group stage of the winter split. AL is a team that you have to take seriously, and I'm really excited about that. Player of the series for me, maybe shockingly, is going to go to Kale in the support position. It shouldn't be shocking if you know this channel. I'm a gigantic Kale Glazer. He's probably one of the channel darlings that represent, my channel going back to the Sandbox days. I've been talking about him so much. That organization just knows how to find support talent, but he's really getting the most out of himself now. Even going back to when he was playing with Prince on those Sandbox teams, it always felt like he wasn't getting enough recognition. I hope he is getting it now in 2025, because he has an argument to be the best support in the world at the current moment in terms of the form that he's in and just what he's capable of doing on the Rift so regularly. Hope's breakout this year is not accidental. Kale has been unbelievable and really is the driving force for a lot of what this team wants to do. It's not just him, but he is going to get player of the series for me. I considered Tarzan or Shanks for player of the series because both of them really gapped their opposition. Tarzan in particular was way better than Kanavi on the other side of this matchup. Just more fuel to the fire of Tarzan being the best jungler in the world, in my opinion. He continues to live up to that reputation. He got to play some carries in this series, which I'm really excited about. You can't give Tarzan Nefiri, but look at that Pantheon game, man. In game number 2, it was absolutely gorgeous. Everything you would want to see out of him. Shanks was awesome. Mega gapped Cream in terms of how this matchup ended up going. That's not what happened in the finals when these two teams played off against each other, and so that's a really encouraging sign. Again, Shanks leveling up over the course of this split, which is really good. Flandra was hugely in favor in his matchup against 369. The two best top laners in terms of production so far is very much in favor of AL. Hope was great, even if Jackie Love wasn't the problem on the other side. AL was just the better team, and you can kind of go across the board and talk about how they were the better team. But when you're looking at where Top Esports ended up faltering in this series, it's the top side of the map. It's 369, it's Kanavi, who just did not play well. Shades of first stand, if you will. 369 I think was all right at that tournament. Kanavi was not all right. And maybe I'm overstating 369's performances, but this was really bad from the top side of Top Esports, and that's just not good enough. Again, you brought these guys in to be the stabilizing presence, the former teammates, on this team, and it didn't really work out in this series. Kanavi's going to get dead of the series, but whether you want to give it to him or 369, I think is really up to your own, personal preference. I think both of them earned it in this series. Neither of them were particularly good. I think 369 was worse in game 2, but Kanavi was probably worse across the whole series if you want to take both games into account. So I'm giving it to Kanavi, but it's just not a good look. Kanavi needs to get more consistent, and it's crazy saying that considering he's kind of running away with the MVP conversation right now, but this is not the first time this year that we've seen him underperform in a big moment. He needs to lock in, and 369, what a bad time to have your worst series of the split up until this point. Just frustrating. I'm not blaming anybody else, really. Cream was worse than Shanks, but this wasn't Cream's fault. Jackie Love and Crisp had no pressure in the 2v2, but Kale played out of his mind in terms of how he played this series. I'm not blaming the rest of Top Esports. I'm blaming the top side of Top Esports. 369 and Kanavi simply have to be better. They were not good enough here today, but that's to AL's credit. This is a team that on any day can be the best team in the LPL and might just be the best team in the LPL on every day. That's how good they are. They lost earlier on in Group Ascent to Top Esports, but they get their revenge in this series. This could be the push they need to get to the top of the standings and to become the favorites here in the LPL. All right, but that is going to do it for my LPL week number 5 overview and analysis video up on the screen. The updated standings after 5 weeks of action. We've got some updated power rankings as well. That's going to be located in the power rankings column to the right of every single team. Change is going to be how that has changed from last week to this week. We can go over the changes, the risers, the fallers, all of that stuff. We have a new number 1, and it's earned. It's anyone's legend going up to number 1. Top Esports fall to number 2. If this is going to be the result in the current way that things are set up, then AL is going to be the best team in the LPL. Right now, it feels like there is a pretty big gap between 1 and 2 and everybody else. Now, potentially that could be breached. There are a couple of teams that I think are hot enough right now that in the best case scenario, like could Bilibili with their new jungler make a run for top 2? Absolutely. Could JD Gaming do it if they get really hot in playoffs? Absolutely. Same thing for Weibo. Hell, even same thing for Invictus if they get hot enough. But right now, Top Esports AL so far and above everybody else, and AL has earned that number 1 spot by taking down Top Esports. JDG will stay at number 3. They looked fine in their series this week. Weibo's going to stay at number 4, and BLG is only going to move up to number 5. I just need to see more out of BLG, but they are very much on track to being back into the top 4. Invictus will fall down to number 6. If I could put them lower confidently, I would, but I feel like this team is going to bounce back eventually, and I'm not going to be on the wrong side of that, so for now they stay in the top 6. And then WE and FPX are both going to move up. WE to 7, FPX to 8. They're in my top 8 right now because Ninjass and Pyjamas are moving down to number 9. Right now, they are not a top 8 team. They are not a team I would project to make the playoffs at the current moment, and that's just so disappointing. They could potentially, have a series against a team like FPX or WE that they can very much win to qualify for those playoffs, but they got to show that they can earn that right now. It's not like they've shown that they're better than those teams, especially in a best-of-5 context, so still a lot to prove there. Thunder Talk, pretty clearly the worst team in Group Ascend. If you wanted to put them down at like number 13 or 14, I kind of agree with you in terms of the form they're in, but at least for now, they stay at number 10. And then moving over to Group Nirvana, Edward Gaming kind of proving they're the best of the rest right now, although I don't think it's by a lot. Like the top of Group Nirvana is all really, shaken up right now. As you can see, 3 teams highlighted in yellow. Those are the teams that are guaranteed to, at the very least, survive going into the next split. So LGD, Edward Gaming, LNG, they are not, in danger of being bottom 2. Only Ultra Prime and RNG will be fighting it out for those bottom 2 spots, but EDG going up to 11, LGD falling down to 12, Ultra Prime will fall down to 13. You could theoretically put LNG above Ultra Prime in terms of their current form. I think that that's totally understandable, but for me, bottom 2 is still RNG, and I still would expect them to lose to Edward Gaming and be that second team eliminated. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with down in the comment section below. Always curious to know your thoughts and opinions down there, but let's go ahead and get into my player of the week and my dud of the week for week number 5. Player of the week for me is going to go to Knight, the mid laner for Bilibili Gaming. What a week for BLG once they turned it around at the start, and I get that they went 2-2, but Knight was really good all week long, but those final 2 series, man, he popped off in like a different kind of way, and nobody was consistent all the way throughout this week. He played a couple of assassin games that really were fun to watch, specifically the Zed game in Game 1 against FPX, but the Akali in Game 3 against Weibo was also excellent, and of course, he got a shout out that Victor game in Game 3 against FPX as well. But my honorable mentions, also teams that had some ups and downs this week, but players that I think played really well across the week. Tian, the jungler for Weibo Gaming, might be a bit of a controversial pick because of that series against Bilibili, but outside of that, he was unbelievably good this week, so I wanted to give him an honorable mention. And then Jackie Love, again, coming off of a series that he lost to AL, he was easily the best player on his team in that series against anyone's legend, and he was excellent before that week. So those are my 2 honorable mentions, but Knight is going to get my player of the week, and then my dud of the week was very easy for me. It's going to go to the Shy, the top laner for Invictus Gaming. How could I give it to anybody else? I mean, he truly ran it across multiple games this week, and Invictus felt like they were falling apart. I think you could realistically give this to a couple of other players, but at the end of the day, I didn't really struggle. 0-3 this week in the Shy, kind of running it for most of that. Yeah, he's dud of the series. I don't care what happened in that final series. So the Shy is my dud of the week, and my player of the week is going to be Knight, but that's going to do it. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. It lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. We're going to be posting about every single week of the LPL here, hopefully more consistently after we get that move done and everything locked down. I'll have more time to really film out these videos, but we're also, of course, covering all 3 of the other major regions, so LTA North, LEC, and LCK, as well as the NACL Tier 2 over in North America. So if you want a comprehensive overview of everything going on in LoL Esports Esports, this is the place for it. Hit subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos do go live. As a reminder, I'm probably going to be on cast almost as soon as this video ends up going up later tonight. If you don't catch that, you can check out the VODs. Links to that will be in the description, and I will be live later this week as well for some, later series during the weekend. So be sure to check that out if you are interested. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. Hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.